Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're diving into a huge topic. Birth rates are plummeting around the world. So the question is, can anything be done to reverse it? Let's find out.
Okay, let's start with a single number, 1.5. It doesn't sound like much, does it? But believe me, this one little number is quietly redrawing the future for, well, a whole bunch of countries.
So what is 1.5? Well, according to the OECD, it's the average number of children a woman in a developed nation is having right now. And get this, it's a record low. To put that in perspective, back in 1960, that number was 3.3. That's a huge drop.
But here's the thing, for a country's population to just stay stable, to replace itself, that number needs to be 2.1. That's the magic number. So you have the 1.5 we're at, and the 2.1 we need. That gap? Well, that's the heart of this whole massive demographic challenge we're talking about.
So what happens when a country falls below that 2.1 mark and just stays there? Well, think about it. You get a smaller and smaller workforce. That means fewer people paying into the system, taxes. And at the exact same time, you have more and more older folks who need things like pensions and healthcare. It's a really tough spot to be in, and a puzzle lots of countries are trying to solve right now.
Okay, before we go any further, there's a key term we've got to know. It's what all the experts and governments use. It's called the total fertility rate, or TFR for short. You know that 1.5 number we've been talking about? Yep, that's the TFR.
All right, so you've got this trend. What are governments doing? Well, they're fighting back. They're trying all sorts of things called pro-natalist policies. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. It's just a fancy way of saying they're trying to create policies that encourage people to have more children.
But does any of this stuff actually work? That's the real question, right? Can a government policy, can money, actually influence a decision that's so incredibly personal?
Well, it turns out a major analysis looked into exactly that, and what they found is pretty fascinating. They saw this stark contrast, this clear line in the sand between two different groups of countries. Okay, so on one side, you've got the high spenders. Think France and Hungary. They pour a pretty significant chunk of their GDP into cash benefits for families. And look at their TFRs. They're higher. Then, on the other side of the divide, you've got the low spenders. Countries like Japan and, look at Korea, with some of the absolute lowest fertility rates in the entire world.
And this chart, this really shows you what we're talking about. Look at that gap. Hungary's up there at 1.72% of its GDP. France is at 1.5%, and then look way down there. That's Japan, at just 0.74%. That is a huge difference in spending, and when you put it next to their birth rates, it's hard to ignore.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean one caused the other, right? Correlation isn't causation. So, to get to the bottom of it, researchers did a massive systematic review. I'm talking, they looked at 61 different studies to really find out what's going on.
And they decided to focus on Japan. With one of the lowest TFRs out there, it's the perfect case study. The big question was, could the stuff that works in other places actually help turn things around for Japan? And what they found was pretty clear. The policies that consistently moved the needle were the ones that provided direct financial support. Things like payments when a child is born, ongoing child allowances, paid maternity leave, help with childcare costs, and even tax exemptions. Essentially, it all boils down to making it less financially stressful to have kids. In fact, the study's conclusion was incredibly direct. They literally wrote, quote, "Cash benefits emerged as the most effective fertility policy in high-income countries." You can't get much clearer than that.
So, okay, what's the path forward for a country like Japan then? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The researchers didn't just stop there. They actually used all this data to model two possible futures for the country.
All right, scenario one. What happens if Japan just does nothing? Keeps its family benefit policies exactly as they are right now?
Well, if they stay the course, the model shows there's only a 29% chance of turning their fertility decline around by 2035. Yeah, not great odds.
But then, there's scenario two. This is the ambitious one. What if Japan went all in and boosted its cash benefits to match what countries like Australia or Hungary are spending?
And check this out, the change is dramatic. Under this scenario, the chance of reversing the decline by 2035 jumps to over 70%. We're talking going from a less than 1 in 3 chance to a better than 2 in 3 chance. It's a total game changer.
So, what's the takeaway from all of this? The evidence really does suggest that money, Direct investment in families is a powerful lever. It seems like it can actually solve the problem, but, and this is a really big but, it costs a fortune.
Just how much are we talking about? Well, for Japan to catch up to those other high-spending countries, the study says it would need to crank up its spending on family cash benefits by anywhere from 46% to, get this, 132%. That is a massive increase.
And that leaves us with a final provocative question. It seems like money can be the answer, but it requires this massive financial commitment. And you have to remember, what works in one culture might not be a silver bullet everywhere. So the real question isn't just about demographics, it's about priorities. If a solution exists, but it has a gigantic price tag, are societies willing to pay it? What price are we truly willing to pay for our own future?